up. I mean, that's some kind of goddamn endorsement. They have not, it has not, the problem has not gotten worse. What a fucking brilliant endorsement. Did it solve the problem? No. Does it solve the problem? No. Would it work in New York City?
Gun crime rates have gone down.
Well, what do you mean by gun crime rates again? Oh, are you talking about gas station robberies? Yeah, because people don't do gas station robberies as often. So, yeah, the gun crime rates have gone down. But what's the gun violence rates?
I'm not sure what distinction you're making there.
Well, there's a distinction between people committing crimes with a gun, Remy, and people who shoot their ex-wife. Those two things are different things. Or people who shoot gang members, okay? Because then they're not committing some kind of crime beyond the fact that they used the fucking gun.
Well, the people who shoot gang members tend to be other gang members, and yeah, it is a crime.
Yeah, and there tends to be a big ton of collateral damage.
Exactly, which is why we have a problem in this country with criminals shooting off guns. But we don't have a problem in this country with law-abiding citizens.
Again, law-abiding citizens, like
cops,
like psychotic, crazy motherfucking cops. Who, how many, like I said, what's the statistic? How many women get killed every year by a fucking crazy ex-husband with a fucking gun? Law-abiding until they go crazy.
Well, I'll tell you what, Gary, since you keep bringing up that point, what is the number? You must have researched that.
I don't know what the number is. I just know it's high enough for me to know. I've always known that I can't depend on myself. I couldn't. Yeah, well, I'm just saying. You're the one who's defending the fucking guns. I'm saying that if it was one person, if it's one fucking woman, it's one too fucking many to justify the stupid, idiotic obsession you fucking goddamn assholes have with your goddamn power bullshit. Because you won't submit to the idea that civilization is something you have to belong to, that you have to commit to, that you don't have the right to shoot it, to blow it up. And you're going to keep making some argument that you're doing something different, but no, it's the same bullshit. It's the same idiotic argument that, oh, I have to have my gun so I can what? Shoot Thomas Jefferson. You think there's an enemy. You can solve the problem with your fucking gun, and your gun doesn't solve the problem, number one, and number two, it creates new victims. That's all it does. The guns wouldn't be here if you didn't put them in the criminals' hands. You're the one that helps manufacture them. You're the one that supports the industry that makes them. All these guns are sold legally at first, and then they end up in illegal occupants' hands. And the only way they get there is because somebody was willing to buy it in the first place. So if there wasn't a buyer for the first gun, the gun would never travel into the hands of the criminal in the second place.
And I see Ujamaa just nodding his head, lauding what you're saying there, Gary. But he ought to know better, because we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago. They took away almost all legally owned guns in Britain. And so if legal gun ownership is the problem, then there ought to be fewer guns in the hands of criminals in Britain, but it ain't so, is it, Uj? And you'll have to admit, because you read the articles I sent you, right?
But what was it 20 years ago? What was it 10 years ago? What were those numbers then? Okay, it worked for a damn long time. All right, and the fact that it doesn't work anymore is the same reason nothing works the same way anymore, Remy, is because the world is a lot more connected. Okay, people cross borders a lot easier than they used to. So I would argue that a lot of Britain's problem isn't so much just Britain anymore. It's because they're importing a population now. They got the same problem we got. They got a bunch of Mexicans, so to speak. Okay, they got a lot of other people in their country now committing fucking crime.
Yeah, Rami, I just
turn to speak.
What you're saying there, those statistics don't necessarily have to fucking match up and be responsible for each other, though. if you say they ban the guns and there's more guns coming in the hands of the criminals, that doesn't necessarily follow that it's because they've all thought, oh, they've illegalized guns, let's all go and get some because now there's less resistance to us. It doesn't have to correlate like that. That's a stretch to do that. There's lots of different factors to consider. Like Gary said, you've got imports. You've got a shifting culture generally that's been happening. Well, there's a shifting culture that is gradually happening anyway. The gang culture that's becoming more prevalent and stuff. Those statistics, you have to work to fix them together. It doesn't necessarily follow on from each other.
Yeah, why don't you use Japan as an example? Why don't you use
Here's the point I made a couple of weeks ago.
Why don't you use Japan as an example?
I thought you got it then, but let me restate it.
Why don't you use Japan as an example?
I was not saying that banning guns from the hands of legal owners was responsible for the rise in the number of guns in the hands of criminals. But what I was saying was that banning guns, taking away guns from legal owners, taking away Grandpa's shotgun, which had stood in his closet for the last 50 years, had absolutely no effect on the availability of guns for criminals. And your stats show that. And if you read those stats carefully enough, you ought to know that.
Well, how long have they had a ban against firearm, small arms, handguns?
97.
So you're saying Britain didn't have a handgun law until 1997, even though cops weren't armed until 1992? I mean, what the hell is that? Doesn't make any fucking sense.
Well, Britain did have... Go back about 100 years, Britain actually had the most liberal gun laws in all of Europe. And then they started bit by bit to, pass restrictions and laws. But it wasn't really until the 1990s that they got serious about disarming all law-abiding citizens. And in
they had a whole thing about the hunting thing and a lot of other stuff. But Remy, this argument doesn't make any sense. When I was a kid, all right, 1970 we're talking about even, okay? I mean, Britain was already disarmed in 1970, right? There wasn't anybody with handguns in Britain in 1970, was there?
Yeah. Handguns were not banned in Britain until about 1997.
Well, who had one, though? What do you mean? So they didn't have a ban against them, but nobody owned them, right? Because cops weren't armed in 1970, right? The average Bobby did not have a handgun in 1970, did he?
Well, the thing about it was that even when Britain had a genuine gun culture, when there were a lot of guns in Britain, Britain had extremely low gun crime rates, very low, and that's because ordinary law-abiding people who own guns just do not tend to shoot other people.
Yeah,
and
until
so
they go wacky,
late 90s,
okay, until they go conspiracy theory nutty, until they turn into right-wing lunatics.
Well, you're making shit up, Gary. But in the late 90s, they took away all handguns, and they took almost all legal guns away from lawful gun owners. And guess what? All of a sudden, Grandpa's shotgun was gone, and the gangbangers kept importing new 9mm from Czechoslovakia.
Well, right, and the gangbangers don't live anywhere near Grandpa anyway, so they're not even an issue, as you already pointed out. Most violence by the gangbangers against other gangbangers and their kids. All right, so it ain't affecting Grandpa any the fuck way. It's this culture, Remy, this culture. This is why I say these words about the fact that this is a reliance on violence as a solution. And that's what has changed, is people think they have autonomy. They think they are an individual. They think all this shit. And they're anti-government, they're anti-this, they're anti-that, and all that